American police have been scouring the woods of northern New York State for an 11th day. They are looking for clues into the whereabouts of two escaped murderers who have been on the run since breaking out of a maximum security prison. The woman who allegedly helped them has pleaded not guilty to a felony count related to prison contraband. One prison escape is daring enough, but try to imagine 7. That's how many times American prisoner Mark DeFriest busted out over more than 3 decades in jail. Mr. DeFriest is the subject of a new documentary, The Mind of Mark DeFriest, by filmmaker Gabriel London. I spoke to Mr. London earlier about the film. Gabriel London, the story of Mark DeFriest, who's been in prison now for over 30 years, is quite extraordinary. Give us a summary of his 3 decades in prison and why he's there.
You know, Mark DeFriest went to prison in 1979. He was 19 years old. It was a will dispute, if you can believe it. His father had passed away suddenly and left behind to him tools. They were mechanics together. Mark was always a brilliant kid. He had grown up with a mechanical ability that was really off the charts, but a social ability that was really troubling. He had a lot of issues getting along with people. He ends up in prison pleading guilty to theft in this case. His stepmother was the one who turned him in, and he escapes.
Screaming, DeFriest, wait up for me! I'm like, what the f is wrong with you people, man?
So you're dealing with somebody who the prison system deems to be mentally ill, but who over the course of his 3 decades in prison has also managed to escape 7 times from jail.
That's right. I mean, so he ends up at first in a mental hospital, but being in a mental hospital that was not a heavily fortified prison, he figured out how pretty quickly to get out one time, and then a second time he was able to make zip guns from wood in the woodshop class and copper plates that he rolled up and basically coercively threatened the folks that were holding him, and he ran from the mental hospital. And it was after that that they put him in the Bay County Jail in Panama City, Florida, where he escaped from 3 different cells, including only one where he only had a toothbrush.
And of course, every time he escapes and every time he attempts to escape, his sentence and the time he spends in prison gets longer.
That's right. And so it was after his escape from Bay County Jail where they basically brought him in after a period that was later found to be torturous conditions to plead guilty. And they offered him a life sentence. And in exchange for getting out of this cell, he was to be given a bed and a visit with his wife. He took that plea deal, and unbeknownst to himself, or because he was really coerced, he had pled guilty to a life sentence. So when I found his story in early 2001, basically Mark had been in prison for 27 years and never committed a violent crime. And you know, at this point, he's been in prison for 35 years and looking at possibly getting out in the next couple years, but nothing is sure.
Gabe, the story is extraordinary of this one man, but it also casts a light on the American prison system and some of the incredibly harsh treatment that Mark was subjected to, at one point being put in a room with absolutely nothing in it by himself for 11 days straight.
Yeah, I mean, Mark spent 27 of the last 34 years in solitary confinement. Mark is like many other people, and we have 80,000 people in the United States at this point who are in long-term solitary confinement. That is indefinite sentences of solitary confinement. You know, the UN really believes that 72 hours is really the limit of what is humane for solitary confinement.
It was a really depressing place.
He found a way to survive many, many years in Florida State Prison in solitary confinement where he had no access to the yard, he had limited reading materials, no TV, no radio, no visits. I have one documented period in the film where we show that he was not allowed to go to the yard not a single time in 10 years.
The film is The Mind of Mark DeFriest. Gabriel London, thanks very much for joining me.